Hello guys, welcome to this video on solving problems on Leetcode. And today we'll be solving a problem on arrays and vectors. And it's a pretty easy problem, but for beginners who have very less experience in this field, that is writing code on these kind of websites and using vectors and how to create logic, how to create a smart logic with the best time complexities. So this video is specifically targeted for all those people who are new and for anyone who wants to revise the basic concepts again before any kind of interview or coding test. Okay, so let's begin. So the question we have is the two-sum problem, and which says that we have an array and we have to return the indices of the two numbers that add up to a specific target. Also, it says that we must assume that each input would have exactly one solution and you may not use the same element twice. Okay, so as much as I can understand from this problem is this is one of my conditions, that you cannot use the same number twice. Okay, so let's see the example first, and it has given me an array or a vector, and the target is 9. So and it's taking 0 and the first element and it's adding them, and if it is equal to 9, then that means there are numbers that sum up to a particular target, and we return the index, these particular index, back. Okay, so it's a pretty easy question. So first of all, when I look at this kind of question, the first logic that comes to my mind is a brute force logic. The brute force logic, it's a logic that is very similar to a selection sort, in which we use two loops. The first loop selects a particular number, for instance 2, and then compares it with each of the other number of the array. So if you modify that kind of logic for this code, what we'll do is in the first loop we'll choose an element, and then in the inner loop we'll add it to each of the other elements in the array and see if the answer is equal to 9 or not. If it is 9, we record those particular indices and return it, and our program is over. Yeah, so that's pretty easy. But the problem there is that if you propose that solution to an interviewer during an interview, he'll ask you the time complexity, and the time complexity for that program will be O of n square, and he'll surely ask for a better solution. So what to do in that kind of situation? It is because of that kind of situation you must always be ready, and you must always have the best solution in mind first. So in this video I'll try to solve this question in O of n time complexity and O of 1 space complexity. So let's start. Okay, so first of all, that the predefined code that I have been given, I see that we have to return an integer vector. So let's create a vector first. So a vector of integer type, and let's call it a. Okay, let's call it anything. Okay, so after that what we can do is let's start a loop which iterates from j is equals to 0 to less than nums dot size and a j plus plus. Okay, so this loop will iterate from the 0th index to the last element of this vector. And if you're not very good with vectors, or if you don't have a lot of understanding of the STL, the standard template library, let me just give a brief overview of vectors. Vectors are basically arrays which are dynamically initialized and with more enhanced features. So with an array you have to predefine the size of the array, but with vectors you can keep adding elements as you go along in your code. So dynamic initialization is a big feature of vectors. So but vectors are used in a very similar way arrays are used, and there are various functions like size, begin, end, which are basically used to tell us various parameters of that vector. So size will give us the length of that vector, just like array length in C++. Okay, so this loop will iterate over the entire length of the vector. Okay, so let's go inside. So now let's think about what kind of logic we want to use for this program. So I can't add the numbers directly and check if they're equal to 9, because that kind of logic will require two loops, and we don't want to do that, because we want to solve the problem in O of n complexity. So let's use another logic, the complement logic. Int complement. Let's create a variable called it complement, and now let's calculate the complement of each number of the given vector. That will be target minus nums of j. So basically what I've done here is that as we are given a particular target, so I'll find the complement of this number 2, that is 9 minus 2, 7, and now I'll check that is 7 present in this array. If it is present, then our work is done, which means that there exists a number which when added to 2 gives me 9. And that's all. That's the simple logic for this code. So let's go ahead and let's find if 7 is present inside this vector or not. So as I told earlier, there are many advantages and benefits of using a vector, and one of them is the predefined functions that can be used, and one of those predefined functions is called find. So I'll use that, and we'll use std find, and std find takes 3 parameters: the beginning address of the array, the end address of the array, and the number that we have to find in the array. Okay, and after taking all these parameters, it checks whether this number complement is present inside this vector nums or not. If it is present, find will return the address of this number, and if it is not present, it will iterate over the entire vector and return the end address, that is nums.address, nums.end, sorry. So now because this function returns something, we need to store that value in something, that address in something. So let's create a vector iterator. So that is created in such fashion: vector of type int and iterator, and let's call it k. Sorry. So iterator is just a fancy term for a variable. For example, j is an iterator which iterates over the entire vector nums, and in this case the iterator k will store the address of this number complement, which we are basically using to find that if this number is present, that means our job is done. If it is not present, then keep searching. Okay, so now I'll write an if condition. If k is not equal to nums.end, that is, k has some other address and it is not the end of the vector, that means we found the number complement inside that vector. Good enough, our work is done. But remember, in these kind of questions there are always conditions that must be satisfied. For this question, this is our condition, that you may not use the same element twice. So what does this exactly mean here for us? It means that, for example, if this target value was 8 and this 0th element was 4, so we must find that we must check that so if the target value is 8 and this element was 4, so 4 plus 4 will give us 8. We don't want that. We are specifically told that we can't use the same element twice. We need two different elements with two different indices. So we need to add another check condition here using and k is not equal to j. Okay, so is this correct? It seems correct, but now another technicality comes here. Now if you don't have a lot of experience using vectors, you might do this wrong and you might end up with an error that you might not understand. So k basically holds the address, it does not hold the index value. So if I run this code, it will show error that you are comparing two objects of different types. You're comparing an integer with a memory address. So that's wrong. So we need to get the index of this element. That can be done by just replacing k by k minus nums dot begin, and a curly brace here, and it's done. Yep, this will work perfectly fine. So basically we are subtracting k, which has a memory address of this number, with the memory address of the first element of the array. So subtracting those will give me the index of the complement number. And I'm checking if that index number is not equal to j, the number whose complement we found. Great, then we're done. So just push these numbers in, push these numbers in A, that is, these are the index values back, and this value here, and return A. That's it. So another thing, if you don't know what this function is, it's called push underscore back, and what it does is this basically does is it's something like this. It's equivalent to this: a of 0 is equals to j, and this number here is a of 1 is equals to k minus nums dot begin. Yeah, it's something like this. So basically it's adding elements from the back of the vector. So it's very easy to understand, and we'll just return A, and I think the code should work. Let's try it. Okay, we have some kind of error. Okay, so just the control reaches the end of non-void function. Okay, just to prevent this kind of error, because we are returning A inside a for loop, maybe at some point of time there is some problem with this code and it doesn't return anything because it's inside an if. If this if clause never works, it's never returning anything. Just to be on a safe side, let's write return A outside this loop. Let's try again. And accept it. Perfect. There is no difference, so it's the same test case that has been provided here. The output should be 0 and 1, and the expected value is 0 and 1. Perfect. Let's submit this, and you'll see, yeah, it's faster than 32% of the code. Yeah, I'm fine. It works perfectly fine. So overall things that we learned in this code is using vectors and how to find an optimal solution for a problem, because we solved this problem in a time complexity of O of n and a space complexity of O of 1. So that's a pretty good solution. It doesn't get any better than that, really. So if you're having problem with vector, I'll attach an online link with this video. You can go ahead and have a read, and you'll get all the information that you require. Using vectors is really easy, and it makes your life very simpler in C++ if you use vectors rather than general arrays. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.